Ukoja was a small village, quiet and peaceful, hidden in the hills of the F Kingdom. The people there lived simple lives, farming, fetching water, and sitting together in the evenings to just everybody knew everybody in Ukoja, and news traveled fast. If something happened to one person, by the next morning the whole village would hear about it. But lately fear had settled over the village. For some months, now young women were being found dead one after the other. Nobody knew what was killing them, but one thing was always the same: the strange marks on their necks. They looked like snake bites, but nobody could say for sure. No one had ever seen a snake around the women when they died. It was as if the deaths were happening in secret. And that made it even more frightening. The village Chief Obi sent hunters into the bush to find the snake. But they came back empty-handed. The deaths didn't stop, and the fear only grew stronger. Mothers started warning their daughters not to move around at night. Even in the daytime, women no longer felt safe. The once lively village became quiet, and people didn't trust as easily as before. But there was one person who didn't seem to care about all the fear. His name was Chima. If you asked any woman in Ukoja who the finest man in the village was, the answer was always Chima, tall, with a muscular body that showed all the hard work he did as a builder. His skin was smooth and dark, and his eyes shone like he always knew something you didn't. His smile alone was enough to make a woman weak. Chima had the kind of charm that made women forget their fears. When he walked through the village, the women would giggle and blush, hoping he would look their way. And when he did, it felt like the sun was shining only on them. Chima knew how to use his looks and sweet words. It wasn't just his fine face. It was the way he spoke, the way he moved, and the way he always seemed to be in control. He could make a woman feel like the only person in the world, but behind all that charm and beauty, Chima carried a dangerous secret. He didn't care about the fear in the village. He didn't worry about the deaths either. He went about his day as if all was well and good. Chima knew he was handsome, and he didn't hide it. He walked around the village with confidence, his head held high, and his eyes always searching for his next catch. The women of Ukoja were drawn to him like ants to sugar, whether at the village, well, the market, or on the farm. As long as Chima was nearby, the women couldn't take their eyes off him. But it wasn't just about his looks. Chima had a way of talking that made any woman feel special. He knew the right things to say at the right time. His voice was deep and smooth like the calm before a storm, and he always knew how to make a woman smile. Even when she was feeling down, he didn't need to rush. Chima took his time, slowly drawing them and making them trust him, making them want him. If he wanted a woman, he would get her. All it took was one charming smile, a few sweet words, and before long she was his. And once he had her, he would take her to his hut at the edge of the village, away from prying eyes. There, under the soft glow of the moon, Chima would work his magic. He was gentle, patient, making each woman feel like she was the most important person in the world. But when the night grew darker, Chima would always ask the same strange question: do you know the difference between a man's manhood and a snake? The women never knew what to say. They would laugh, thinking it was a joke. But before they could answer, Chima would whistle a soft, eerie sound that seemed to float in the air. The women would feel uneasy, like something was about to happen. And that's when it did. Something would shift in the room. And before they could react, they would feel a cold, smooth touch on their skin. A snake, dark and dangerous, would slither out from Cha's trousers. The women always froze, their fear too strong to scream or run. The snake would wrap itself around them slowly, as if toying with its prey. Then with a quick strike, it would bite them on the neck. The bite was always the same, two sharp marks, like fangs, sinking deep into their skin. The venom would spread quickly. The women would gasp, their bodies shaking, as the poison took hold. Within minutes, it was over. They were dead, and Chima was left standing over their lifeless bodies, his face expressionless. By morning, the woman's body would be found in the village square, cold and pale, with the strange bite marks on her neck. The villagers would gather around, shaking their heads, wondering what kind of snake could do such a thing. But no one ever suspected Chima. He was too handsome, too charming, too perfect. Each time another woman died, the fear in the village grew. But Chima didn't care. He continued his life as if nothing was happening. The women still blushed and giggled when he walked by, completely unaware of the danger that lurked beneath his good looks and sweet words. Life in Ukoja went on even with the fear hanging over the village. The women were more cautious, especially at night. But the daily routine of fetching water, farming, and trading continued. Every time a woman died, people would mourn, but nobody had any answers. The village chief, Obi, tried to keep the people calm, but deep down, everyone knew that something was wrong, and it wasn't just a normal snake causing these deaths. Then one day, a new face appeared in the village, a woman named Adanna. She was different from the Other women in Yucca, tall and graceful with skin that shone like polish, with Adanna carried herself with confidence. Her beauty wasn't just in her face or body, but in the way she moved, as if she wasn't bothered by anything around her. She had come to visit her aunt who lived on the edge of the village, and almost immediately she caught Cha's attention. Chima noticed Adanna the first time he saw her at the well. Unlike the other women who couldn't help but stare at him or blush when he passed by, Adanna didn't seem impressed. She didn't giggle, she didn't stare, she didn't even smile at him. Instead, she looked straight past him, her face calm, like she was in control of everything. This intrigued Chima. He wasn't used to being ignored, and Aiden's calmness felt like a challenge to him. He had always been able to win over any woman he wanted, and he wasn't about to let Adanna be the first one to resist him. From that moment, Chima decided that he had to have her. Chima began to watch Adanna more closely. He noticed that she was always polite, but never too friendly. She spoke kindly to people, but she never allowed anyone to get too close to her. This only made Chima want her more. He wasn't just interested in her beauty. He was fascinated by her mystery, by her strength. The more he watched her, the more determined he became. Chima wasn't used to failing, and he wasn't about to start now. He began to follow Adanna, looking for opportunities to speak with her, to charm her like he had done with so many others. But each time he approached her, Adanna kept her distance, as if she knew something that he didn't. One afternoon, Chima found his chance. Adanna was at the filling her water pot, and there were fewer people around. Chima walked up to her, his usual confident smile on his face. Adanna, he said smoothly, his voice deep and sweet, like honey. Let me help you carry that. Adanna glanced at him, her face expressionless. She didn't look impressed by his looks or his charm, and this only made Chima more eager. He waited for her to giggle or blush like the others, but instead she simply nodded. If you insist, she said calmly, stepping back to let him take the pot. Chima felt a small victory. He lifted the pot easily and placed it on his head, making sure to show off his strength. As they walked to her aunt's house, Chima tried to make small talk, but Adanna remained quiet. She answered his questions politely, but didn't give him any more than necessary. This wasn't what Chima was used to, but he told himself it was only a matter of time before she fell for him. All the women eventually did. She is only playing hard to get. He just had to work a little harder with this one. After that day at the well, Chima couldn't get Adanna out of his mind. She wasn't like the other women of Yucca. Most of them would have melted under his smile, giggling and blushing, but not Adanna. She was different. The more distant she remained, the more obsessed Chima became. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to a woman not giving him the attention he was used to. It was new, it was frustrating, and it made him want her even more. Chima had always been able to get any woman he wanted with little effort. Just a flash of his smile, a few smooth words, and the women of Ukoja were as they were, all the same, soft, eager, easy to seduce. But Adanna, she wasn't falling for any of his tricks. She seemed immune to his charm, and this drove Chima crazy. Day after day, he watched her when she fetched water, when she walked through the market, even when she visited the farm with her aunt. Adanna carried herself with a quiet strength that made her stand out. She didn't seem to care about anyone's opinion, least of all Chima. She lived her life peacefully, and that only made her more attractive to him. Chima started finding excuses to talk to her. At first it was little things, offering to help carry her load, trying to make small talk, trying to get her attention in any way he could. But no matter what he did, Adanna stayed polite, but distant. Her calmness was beginning to bother him. One evening, Chima couldn't take it anymore. He decided that he needed to do more. He needed to take control of the situation. He couldn't let Adanna continue to slip through his fingers. He had never failed with a woman before, and he wasn't about to start now. Chima knew that Adanna often visited her aunt's small farm just outside the village where they grew yams and vegetables, so he decided to wait for her there. It was a warm evening, and the sun was beginning to set, casting a soft orange glow over the fields. He leaned against a tree, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes focused on the path leading to the farm. Finally, he saw her. Adanna was walking slowly, her steps steady and graceful. She was carrying a basket of yams on her head, her back straight, her face calm as usual. As she approached, Chima stepped forward, blocking her path. Adanna, he said, his voice deep and smooth. You've been avoiding me. Adanna raised an eyebrow and looked up at him, not breaking her calm expression. I've been doing no such thing, Chima. I've just been busy. Her response irritated him. Chima wasn't used to being brushed off like this. He was used to women being excited to see him, not acting like he didn't matter. But he forced a smile, trying to keep his cool. You're always so serious, he said, taking a step closer. Why don't you let me walk with you? We could get to know each other better. Adanna gave him a long look, her face still unreadable. For a moment Chima thought she might actually agree, but then she shook her head, stepping around him. "I'm not interested, Chima," she said simply. Chima stood there stunned. He wasn't sure if he was more shocked or angry. How could she just walk away from him like that? Nobody had ever said no to him like this. His pride felt bruised, but more than that, his obsession with Adanna grew even stronger. He couldn't let her slip away so easily. No, she would be his no matter what it took. As Adanna walked away, Chima's eyes darkened. He made a promise to himself. Right there he would have her, and she wouldn't be able to resist him for long. Chim's frustration grew as Adanna continued to resist him. He was used to women falling for him quickly, but Adanna wasn't like the others. The more she ignored his advances, the more obsessed he became. He knew he had to change his approach to win her over. This time, he decided to be patient, to play the long game instead of showering her with attention like before. Chima pulled back. He stopped following her around and barely spoke to her. When they crossed paths, it didn't take long for Adanna to notice the change. She had expected him to keep trying, but now he seemed distant, almost uninterested. The shift in Chima's behavior worked. After days of watching him from a distance, Adanna became curious. She approached him one evening as he sat outside his hut sharpening his tools. "You've been quiet lately," she remarked, her tone calm but curious. Chima simply nodded, keeping his answers short and his face expressionless. He knew this would draw her, and after a few moments of silence, Chima suggested a walk, and Adanna agreed, her guard lowering slightly. As they walked, Chima kept the conversation light, just enough to keep her comfortable. He wanted her to believe that he was a changed man, and that he was more than the charming, attention-seeking womanizer she had assumed, and slowly it seemed to work. Chima had played his cards right, and now Adanna's defenses were lowering. She no longer looked at him with suspicion, and her once guarded responses softened. Chima could sense that the moment he had been waiting for was near. His patience had paid off. One evening, as the sun was setting over the village, Chima decided it was time to act. He invited Adanna to his hut, saying they could share a quiet evening together. Adanna, now more comfortable around him, agreed. The air was still, and the village seemed almost too quiet as they made their way to his hut on the outskirts of Ukoja. Inside, the flickering light from a small oil lamp cast soft shadows on the walls. Chima offered her a seat and poured her some palm wine, his voice calm and soothing. As they talked, Adanna sipped the wine slowly, her eyes watching him carefully, but no longer with the sharpness of before. Chima smiled inwardly, knowing that the moment was finally his. He moved closer, gently brushing his fingers against her hand, and began to speak in that low, seductive voice he was known for. "Adanna," he said softly, "I've been thinking about you. You're different from the others, strong, independent." Adanna smiled faintly, still relaxed, but Chima could see the effect his words were having. He leaned in a little closer, his voice now almost a whisper. "Do you know the difference between a man's manhood and a snake?" Adanna's brows furrowed, slightly confused by the sudden question. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, Chima began to whistle. The sound was soft at first, barely noticeable, but it grew louder, filling the room with an eerie tune. Adanna shifted in her seat, suddenly uneasy, but it was too late. From the shadows, a dark shape began to stir. Adanna's eyes widened as she saw it, a snake, long and menacing, slithering out from Chim's trousers. The cold, smooth scales glistened in the dim light as the creature coiled around her. Chima watched, his face expressionless, as the snake prepared to deliver its deadly bite. But something was different this time. Adanna, though terrified, suddenly reached into the folds of her wrapper and pulled out a small white flute. Without a moment's hesitation, she blew into it, and the sound that came out was sharp, piercing, and filled the air with a strange energy. Chim's eyes widened in shock as the snake froze mid-strike. It hesitated, confused, its eyes now locked on Adanna instead of its usual prey. She blew the flute again, and this time the snake slowly turned away from her and slid back toward Chima. Chima stumbled back, ward, fear flashing across his face. For the first time, the snake, now under Adanna's control, coiled around him, tightening its grip. Chima gasped, struggling for breath, as the serpent constricted, its fangs hovering near his neck. How did you?" Chima stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Adanna's face was calm, her eyes cold and steady. "You're not the only one who knows how to control a snake. It's time you paid for your wicked acts. Also remember to say hi to Nkem." Before Chima could respond, the snake struck, sinking its fangs into his neck. The Venom spread quickly, paralyzing him. Almost instantly his body convulses, breathing shallow as the life drained out of him. Adanna stood over him, her expression unreadable, as Chim's body, when still the snake, loosened its grip and slithered away into the darkness, leaving Chima lifeless on the floor. Long before Ada ever set foot in UK, so her heart was heavy with grief and anger. The reason she had come to the village wasn't just to visit her aunt, it was to find answers. A few months earlier, she had lost her closest friend Nkem in one of the mysterious deaths that had shaken the nearby villages. The pain of losing Nkem had cut deep, and Adanna had made a vow to herself that she would find the person responsible. Nkem and Adanna had grown up together, inseparable since childhood. Nkem was full of life, always laughing, was bright. They had shared everything from their dreams to their deepest secrets. One evening, Nkem had told Adanna she was seeing someone new, a man she described as tall, handsome, and charming, someone who made her feel like the only woman in the world. But Nkem never mentioned his name. She only said that this new man had something mysterious about him, something she couldn't quite explain. 2 weeks later, Nkem was found dead. Her body lay in the village square, cold gold and pale, with strange bite marks on her neck. Just like the others, the village mourned her loss, but no one had answers. Adanna was devastated, and her grief quickly turned to suspicion. Who was this man Nkem had been seeing? Why hadn't she revealed his name? And why did no one know anything about him? Adanna couldn't let it go. She knew that her friend's death wasn't some random accident. It had to be connected to this mysterious man. Her instincts told her that something dark was at play. So she began asking questions quietly, carefully. She wanted to know everything there was to know about the recent deaths. And soon enough, her search led her to Ukoja. When Adanna arrived in Ukoja and laid eyes on Chima for the first time, she immediately suspected him. His looks, his charm, and the way he commanded attention, it all fit the description Nkem had given. Chima was the kind of man who could seduce any woman, and Adanna's instincts told her that he was hiding something, but Adanna knew she couldn't confront him directly. Chima was too careful, too clever. If she wanted to get to the bottom of the mystery, she had to be patient. She had to play his game, make him think she was just another woman drawn to his charm, and so she allowed him to approach her, to believe he was slowly winning her over. But all the while, Adanna was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Before coming to Ukoja, Adanna had sought the help of a powerful oracle in her home village. The deaths were too strange, too similar to be the work of an ordinary snake. The oracle was known for seeing beyond the physical world, for uncovering hidden truths, and Adanna hoped she would have answers. The oracle had welcomed Adanna into her small hut filled with the smell of burning herbs and thick with the energy of the unseen. Adanna explained everything in Nkem's mysterious death, the bite marks, the strange man her friend had mentioned. The oracle listened in silence.